Welcome. If you haven't seen this film yet, I would highly recommend that you do so, as I will be discussing story beats and plot points. I will also be mentioning certain things from the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow comic and the Superman film from last year. Same idea applies there. If you have seen/read all those, or just don't really care, let's jump into it. Directed by Craig Gillespie, Supergirl is a sci-fi superhero film based on the comic miniseries Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely. It follows Supergirl, aka Kara Zor-El, a Kryptonian who goes to other solar systems that will nullify her powers so she can get drunk on her 23rd birthday. One day, someone steals her ship and shoots her dog with a poison in the process. The only way she can get the antidote is to track this person down across the galaxy. Alright. My thoughts before going into the movie, because at the time of recording this, I won't be seeing it till tomorrow, because I won't have a lot of downtime in between then, so I kind of have to record this now. It's a little all over the place, mainly because I'm still super excited for the movie, but after the months upon months of just pointless, quote-unquote, controversies and stupid criticisms, if you can even call it that, on like the promotional material or the trailers or whatever the fuck Critical Drinker was doing, made me just very exhausted. And then of course, when I'm recording this, the early reviews just came out, like from Rotten Tomatoes, and they don't look very promising. And of course, again, people are using this to, again, just be a whole thing. I don't want to go any further into that. I'm fucking tired as hell. And by the time I actually write a script, it's just going to be on the movie itself. But yeah, all the trailers look really interesting. I have read the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow comic. It is very good. I honestly don't expect the movie to live up to it because, again, the comic is really fucking good. But yeah, so the next time you hear me, it'll be when I've come back from the movie, when I've written a script, whatever. Yeah. So, I was correct in thinking the movie wouldn't be as good as the comic, but I should state that doesn't mean I thought the film was bad. I actually really enjoyed it. Obviously, I still have my problems with it, like I do every film, but let's focus on other aspects for now. I'll just get the obvious out of the way. Yes, Millie Alcock is wonderful in this film. Of course, the most we had to go off of before was her not even minute or two of screen time in Superman 2025, but she fully leaned into it here. In basically every scene, she plays it well, either when she's reminiscing about her life on Argo before being sent to Earth, or when she's acting like an airhead around Lobo just to make sure Ruthie doesn't get hurt. I don't think I need to sing her praises any further, as even people who don't seem to care all that much about the film still thought she was great. I do want to focus on some of the other cast members, however. Eve Ridley as Ruthie is fine. I'll go over it in more detail later as the video goes on, but Ruthie kind of just feels like she's there in the film. Jason Momoa as Lobo. Just yes. As I stated before in my DCEU series, Jason Momoa has been waiting to play Lobo for God knows how long. I'm not even kidding when I say that you can just tell he was having way more fun in this film than he was for Aquaman. Or rather, by the way he plays Lobo, it feels like he's actually interested in portraying the character rather than making a fool out of himself like in other films, like a Minecraft movie, for example. Finally, Matthias Schoenaerts as Krem of the Yellow Hills. Dear God, I hope I pronounced that, because all of the videos I was looking at to actually pronounce his name correctly were not very helpful. Anyways, I'm gonna be honest, I have no way of fully describing my thoughts on him here. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like I liked him in the comic. Honestly, he was kinda boring in the comic. Even his design was kinda boring. Now, I wasn't expecting this Mad Max shit, but I don't hate the design change. Honestly, it's the way he plays this character. Krem of the Yellow Hills is intentionally a very conniving antagonist, but here, he's hamming it up every other scene. For some scenes, I think it works, but for some others, it feels tonally incongruent. I think it's more of a case-by-case basis. Honestly, he really only shares a name with the original and nothing else. So, I want to make this clear that I don't fully want to turn this into a comparison video between the film and the comic. The main reason being, I read the comic a few months ago, and the movie I've only seen once. I'd be going off of memory alone for the most part, so it probably wouldn't be the most accurate. Plus, I'm sure there's already like 80 by the time this video goes up. If you're truly that curious, watch those or just read the comic for yourself. However, I will bring up parts that were changed from the comic that I believe were for the worse, or at least was something I wasn't expecting. I do actually agree with the notion that you should watch the film first, then read the comic if you haven't already. Not only because I personally think the comic is a more enjoyable experience, but also because it really fleshes out the relationship between Ruthie and Supergirl. See, the main change about this film that I don't hate, but I don't think was done in a way that really captured what the comic was trying to do, it's the fact that in this film, Supergirl is the lead character. Now, for someone who hasn't read the comic, that probably sounded insane. But seriously, Supergirl kinda isn't the main character in the Woman of Tomorrow comic. It's Ruthie. Most of the comic is from Ruthie's perspective, and it really captures that idea of her seeing Supergirl actually embrace being a hero instead of some drunk loner who really only hangs out with her dog. Now, I'm not saying that this is an inherently bad change. In fact, I think it's a change that makes sense. But I am saying that because of it, Ruthie feels a lot less important in the overall narrative, and also means Eve Ridley isn't given nearly enough to work with considering the amount of stuff in the comic. Then again, I don't know how much internal monologuing I would have been able to take. I do think they should have made her super verbose here, like in the comic, but that's for no other reason than I thought it was funny as hell. There's two more major changes I'd like to go over before I go into the way more negative aspects of the film for me. The first is the fact they took Woman of Tomorrow, an 8-issue miniseries that, while it's not a long read, it's not a short one either, and turned it into a 1 hour, 48-minute film. If you've read the comic, you can definitely see where those extra bits were cut in order to fit that shorter runtime. Granted, the comic is slightly more episodic in nature, so obviously not all plot threads were needed. However, even then, the through line of Ruthie and Supergirl's friendship severely suffers here. Hell, I'd hardly even call them friends here. Honestly, I can kind of see why they dropped the Woman of Tomorrow subtitle from the film, because this is a film only inspired by it. It's easier going into it thinking it's someone just taking the general plot beats and characters and doing their own thing with it. They also probably dropped it because the next Superman film is going to be called Man of Tomorrow, but whatever. Finally, I'd like to talk about Lobo's place in the story. Like I said, I loved Lobo here. I think Jason Momoa did it extremely well, and you can tell he actually gave a shit about the character he was playing. However, I do agree that he felt like a bit of an afterthought in the narrative. If you really think about it, he only has one actually important purpose in the story, and that's to save Supergirl from being murdered at one point. See, I very much am a stickler for things that were clearly only in a movie or show to set up another movie or show. That's why I can't stand shows with backdoor pilots, especially if they don't really go anywhere. So it was disappointing seeing how they didn't fully attempt to integrate Lobo into the story, which is strange given that I truly believe it could have worked. But here's a few of the overly negative things I have to say. The first, and probably most important thing, is the dialogue. Now, I should state that it's not all the dialogue. I want to make that very clear, as a lot of people seem to be allergic to understanding that distinction. But there are a few lines that legit made me sigh or cringe in the theater. Probably the line that made me cringe the most was, "We haven't been formally introduced. Hi, I'm the bitch whose dog you shot." I do see what they were trying to go for. I really do. But oh my god, there is a reason why people are allowed to give feedback on scripts, you know. Another thing I didn't really like was the action. It felt a little held back, especially anytime Lobo was in a scene. It was very PG-13, but it's not just that, it's also near the end when they use a shit ton of slow-mo. Look, I like slow-mo as much as the next guy for action sequences, but only when it's used sparingly. It's literally stuff like this that I gave a lot of Zack Snyder's films shit for, the Snyder Cut of Justice League especially. Now, it was nowhere near that level, but it was starting to get a tad exhausting, and I don't think it did a great job at displaying Supergirl's speed and agility, which is what I was assuming they were trying to convey there. The last thing is the use of licensed music. Now, I'm usually pretty iffy on licensed music in films, mainly because in some instances, it's mostly only there for recognition rather than genuine storytelling. This film kind of just used them for the sake of using them. It's not even in a diegetic sense. We know Kara clearly has a connection to Earth music, especially given when she takes over the jukebox in the bar she meets Ruthie in, but there's no real significance to the songs used. This is the one and only time I will bring up James Gunn's films in order to contrast them with how this film did things. But in films like Guardians of the Galaxy and Superman 2025, it understood what made a needle drop so important, because it either has a narrative purpose and reflects what's going on in the story, or music is important to one of the main characters, or the scene was written and shot with that particular song in mind. Especially after James Gunn has stated that he literally writes the songs into his scripts. Like, there's no getting around what he envisions in a scene. So this film, not exactly understanding what made needle drops in films like those work, doesn't exactly help and kind of took me out of the film. Typically, if there's a licensed song in a film, I'd prefer if it had some actual significance to it and makes sense in a wider lens. There's always a question of, can the scene work without the music? If so, why is that? Even if the scene works with the music, the same rule applies. But I've been a little too negative. I want to stress that I really do like this film, but there is a part of me that thinks people are being a bit too harsh on it. The first thing I actually really liked was a lot of the world building and creature effects. See, I know I've been hearing the Guardians of the Galaxy comparison a lot, which I'm getting very tired of, and is the reason why I stressed the fact I was actually contrasting it with this film. But I was honestly getting a bit more Star Wars vibes from this. Now, that's not to say they're one-to-one. They're obviously not, so keep those fingers away from your keyboard until I'm finished my point. I mean more in the fact that they almost do it in the A New Hope and Rogue One way, where the aliens are just kinda there. They don't go out of their way to explain anything unless they feel it's absolutely necessary. Not to mention the opening of the film that just shows Kara going from pub to pub partying also kind of felt like the cantina scene from A New Hope. I also bring up A New Hope and Rogue One because these worlds don't feel clean or polished. They feel lived in. They're dirty. They've been walked through thousands of times a day. It's not a perfect set. Another compliment I'll give the film is the fact that while it's really only inspired by the Woman of Tomorrow comic, I do think they get across a few of the central themes and ideas. Mainly Supergirl overcoming her trauma, Ruthie learning revenge is not the answer, and Supergirl actually embracing the hero title. Yes, it is missing a few other things, but it did get the basic beats down. Something else I really liked was Superman in this film. For the most part, it is only in flashbacks, but they work insanely well for me. Not only does it further prove my opinion that dorky Superman is the most endearing, but I think it better shows how Clark and Kara differ, especially after you've seen Superman 2025 and fully looking into not only their characters, but also how the filmmakers make the film work around them in terms of tone. It also kind of makes me wonder if this film and Man of Tomorrow mostly take place at the same time, because the way Superman talks about, the last guy thought I could have used your help, or whatever shit, does make me think he's referring to Brainiac, but that's more speculation. Anyways, I do hope that people understand that while this film isn't perfect, clearly considering how much I still criticized it, I don't think it's the spawn of Satan like some people are making it out to be. I think it's a good sci-fi romp that's a decent character study on Supergirl. Plus, I went to see this film with my girlfriend, and she fucking loved it, so who the hell am I to judge? I will say, though, I do think it's extremely funny that the film people are criticizing the most out of the DCU so far is the first one that doesn't have James Gunn as a writer and or director. I don't mean this in a James Gunn stan way, I just think it's immensely funny, and I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone mention that yet. I'll give Supergirl an 8 out of 10. I'm still pretty excited to see what comes next. Still curious about Lanterns in 2 months, and I'm still extremely excited for Clayface, even if I still think it's odd that it's the third film being released in this universe. Anyways, I thank you so much for watching, and remember, come back anytime!